Welcome along to the second edition of this season's Gary Neville Podcast. Gary and I today coming to you from Villa Park, where we've seen Arsenal put out, can we call it a statement victory this early in the season?
I think so. I think that obviously what happened in these two games last season has been well reported before. We were aware, and I thought it was going to be a brilliant game. I thought that it would be tough, a real test for Arsenal. Villa are a good side. The game itself didn't really sort of pan out how I thought it would. It was quite slow, cagey. They were waiting for each other. They were letting the game drift. And I said, I think about 60, 65 minutes, that if one team goes a goal down here, they can't have any complaints. And Arsenal should have gone a goal down. I mean, they should have gone a goal down in the first half. I don't know at what point in this podcast you want to speak about Ollie Watkins. Obviously someone who's been sensational for Villa and will continue to be, I'm sure. But he was just that little image of him we saw towards the end of the game on the bench when obviously he'd been substituted. And he just had that sort of resigned look. And I have to say that as I get older, I do remember the difficult moments in my career more when you go home on that Saturday night and you've made that mistake as a defender, and for obviously a striker it's completely different. They've usually missed a chance or two, and he'll feel that tonight. And
do they take longer to get out of the system then, the older you are?
I think you just remember them when you're older. I think that obviously from Watkins' point of view, he's an experienced player, so I think he'll recover from it quite quickly. But that will still just knock him tonight. He'll just go home. He won't be the same at home with the people who he's with. And, you know, the family feel it and everyone feels it. But he's had two big chances. The one in the first half was an open goal in the end because Raya had obviously gambled to go that way. And he sort of like pulled it into the near post and just missed the target. And you think, oh, you're not going to get, I mean, I said at the time, you're not going to get a better chance against this Arsenal defence than that. But he did. And the one in the second half, I'm part in awe of the recovery powers of goalkeepers. I mean, it's interesting this actually. We used to do these sprint tests, these sort of explosive sprint tests from, you know, obviously you start at 0 and then you go 5 metres, 10 metres, 15 metres, 30 metres, I think it was. And you used to measure the players in the squad's speed. And it was always the goalkeepers that would win 0 to 5 because of their ability just to get off the mark really quickly. And that you saw that with Raya, how he's thrown himself onto the ground in quite a dramatic style. He's jumped up in the air. He's landed hard on the grass. And then all of a sudden, he's there with his hand. It's absolutely remarkable physical work that he puts in to be able to do that. The agility, the strength, the sort of work that he'll do in the gym and the work that he does every day with his goalkeeping coaches. You've just seen there something that's a world-class moment. But from the other side, I think Ollie Watkins has almost taken it for granted because you would always think that, you know, it wasn't hard for him just to sort of guide it away from where Raya was completely. He thinks, I'm sure, that Raya is out of the game. He's on the floor. I just need to get it on target. It doesn't matter where it goes on target because the goalkeeper's in the back of the net and he's never going to get up in time. And I think he takes it for granted in that moment and doesn't just put it into the far corner. So I think he'll see it as a really bad miss. I think we see it as a bit of both really well, a lot of both, because it is a bad miss, but it's an unbelievable bit of goalkeeping. And the moment that I actually made me give David Raya man of the match. And it was interesting because I actually didn't put David Raya in my team of the year last year. And this week in Manchester, he was named in the PFA team of the year by the rest of the Premier League players. It's a great reward for him. And I actually put Martinez, who had a difficult moment in this game, for the second goal from Partey. But he's just doing this interview now in front of us, and he deserves that man of the match today for a world-class moment.
And we should highlight him, shouldn't we? Because less than a year ago, Mikel Arteta was facing some criticism for what seemed a really ruthless decision to dispose of Aaron Ramsdale and to bring him in. And yet he won the Golden Glove last year. As you've mentioned, he was in the PFA team. In the summer, he's won the Euros, even though it was as a backup goalkeeper. He did play one game there. So is Arteta's decision then vindicated now?
I mean, to be honest with you, the only thing, I mean, I complained at the time, what I complained about was this idea that you have two number ones and that they compete for a place. I don't believe that happens. I mean, it's going to come at Chelsea, I think, probably in the next few weeks, where you've got multiple goalkeepers and you've got this uncertainty, and I've never seen it really work. What Mikel Arteta was actually doing was selecting David Raya as number one, as we found out in the end, and letting Ramsdale down quietly, rather than just coming out in the press conference and saying, look, David Raya's my number one. He said, no, I've got two goalkeepers, I want them both to compete. But the reality of it was that Raya was his number one, and he brought him in to take over from Ramsey. And he's done that successfully. I mean, what you can't deny is Arsenal's defensive record. Not all down to him, but when they do get past that sort of very, very good defence, very good centre-back pairing, good midfield, the shape of the team's fantastic as well. I mean, the way in which now you see Martinelli or Trossard and Saka tucking narrow towards the midfield to whoever they are, and the way in which Havertz and Ødegaard come back to defend is absolutely wonderful. Whether they're pressing high up the pitch and they push the whole team, or whether they're actually now defending deep at times and they play a different type of way. I really like the way what Mikel Arteta's done. He's not saying we're a high-pressing team. They can be, but they also can now play deep. They're a team that actually adapts to the style of the game, the way in which the game's going. They weren't at the best today at all, but what they've done with the goalkeepers, I think, and what he's done with Raya it's such an important position. It is vital. If you have uncertainty in your goal, you've got a real problem. And David Raya's had a brilliant move. Obviously, the move was completed this last summer that we've just gone through. But he's definitely now obviously the number one. And in the end, it's proven to be the right decision. It looks like now Ramsdale's going to go out and play somewhere else in the Premier League. He needs to go. He needs to play football. There's no way he's going to sit there and watch David Raya play football for the next few years. But Arsenal are very, very good defensively. Very, very good defensively. The one thing today for Arsenal that was, I mean, it was hard for them all over the pitch. I think it was hard for Partey and Rice in midfield against Morgan Rogers at times when Rogers got on the half turn. The one player that I think that I would say just needs that little bit of belief back in his game is Martinelli. It was really obvious to me because he was down here in front of us, wasn't he, in the first half, and I notice it because when they're playing against a right back, I always think, what do I not want? And there was a moment in the game, I think he was counter-attacking against Pau Torres and he was against Matty Cash in the early parts of the game, and I thought, Martinelli's in that situation at this moment in time where I think he's an instinctive player who's direct, and he's best when he's running at real pace and you're not quite sure what he's going to do next, and really driving at the sort of standing foot of a right back. He's definitely hesitating when he gets the ball and not quite knowing what to do. And I can't quite work out whether that's just a lack of belief and confidence or whether there's a little bit of the Pep Guardiola sort of wide controller type sort of wide player move coming into the Arsenal game where they obviously get it wide and then they think, well, hang on a minute, I'm not going to give the ball away by going one-on-one, I'm going to recycle it. And he is just coming back and taking the safe option and the cautious option at times, and sometimes you have to do that. But there were moments in that game when it was so obvious he had 5-10 yards start on his right back, like almost like a run-up at them, and the space to go at. I would never let a right back off the hook. Don't let me off. If a left winger's playing against me, if Mark Overmars is playing against me, and I think he's just going to sort of run towards me, turn around and pass it back, I'm really, really happy. He didn't do that very often. Neither did Perez. They would run at you directly, and then you'd have a left back going round, which is what Arsenal do as well. Obviously, they have players going round you. You have obviously then midfield players making runs inside. So I just feel like he's one that needs obviously a little bit of care and attention at this moment in time because he's just not quite there, and they need to get him back in. And I called it pretty early that Trossard would have to come on early in the second half, and he made the most magnificent impact.
It's especially a worry with Martinelli, though, isn't it? Because for a lot of that game, I mean, Cash got injured early, and he was up against a Premier League novice.
Yeah, I can't pronounce his name yet, but you can.
Nedeljkovic.
Nedeljkovic. You're right. Like you say, Cash, he should have been really happy, Martinelli, at the start of the game when Konza wasn't actually right back. Because Cash, I think, can run forward. I think he provides, obviously, he's a good player. But I think you can get at him defensively. And he's not as attentive as Konza would have been at right back. He almost would have been like a rash to Martinelli. So I think that Cash was playing, and he actually went past him and obviously caused him the injury, or assisted in causing the injury with his hamstring, it looked like it went. And then when the Nedeljkovic came on, you're thinking, right, get at him. If I saw a young kid come on at left back on my side, I'd be saying to my right winger, let's punish him, let's get at him, let's test him, let's work him. I'd really, really be asking that question because you just want to find out in a game what someone's got, particularly when you've not seen them before. And Martinelli just let them off the hook a little bit. He wasn't bad. He wasn't terrible in the game, but he definitely just has lost that little bit of belief. And it stands out because of how brilliant him and Saka are when they're both at it together. The magical and beautiful wide pairing. And he's just a little bit below that at this moment in time, Martinelli.
What about Trossard then? Does he make himself too useful as a substitute?
That's the problem sometimes when you have someone like that. But I think he's a very good player, very intelligent player, smart player, very important part of Arsenal's squad. Great that you have players in a 20-21, 22-man squad, that you've got such quality, such good professionals that understand that it's a long season, that they're going to play their part, not just as a substitute, but actually in a lot of games they'll start as well. And that's always been the case in teams that have been successful. And Arsenal are on the brink of success. They're not quite got there yet where they want to be, but they'll have the Champions League games, they'll have FA Cup, they'll have Carabao Cup, they'll have the obviously big league games. They've got 36 left, and they're all cup finals. The way in which Manchester City make a league title nowadays and what you have to do, every game's absolutely vital. You can't have a month off. You can't have a week or two off. It's just impossible. So it's difficult. So they're all going to contribute. They're all going to give their... if Arsenal be successful this season and win the league, they'll know that they all have to do their part and do their jobs. And it's difficult sometimes when you're left out, but he seems to handle it really, really well. And today, his first goal was really good, because I think I always say to an opposite wide player, if I'm playing against him, that would have caused me a real problem, that run. And if it had been being crossed from the other side, you just said, well, okay, yeah, I can understand why he's made that run. But it wasn't a cross. He actually anticipates that something's going to happen. He anticipates that Havertz and I think it's more Rodgers are going for like a tussle, like a 50-50. And it just breaks in the box. And that's the real smart part of it. I think that would have caught me definitely as a right back. I think that would have, because I would have thought, well, I'm not quite sure. You want to get your arm across him, but he gets into a great position where he runs across the face. Great finish, and I thought his spin for the second goal, I was watching it, and Gabriel sees it, brilliant pass, but the timing of that spin is beautiful. And there's things that Trossard has that Martinelli doesn't, and vice versa, but there may be parts of Trossard's game that Martinelli could look at in terms of his timing and his understanding of the position. He's just slightly better than Martinelli's, but Martinelli's breathtaking in his own way. But there are parts that he could look at Trossard, because he's a really, really good player. I mean, he's one of those players that I would play against, wouldn't think that he's going to go past me, wouldn't think that he's got electric pace, wouldn't think he's going to beat me in the air at the back post, but he might score a goal and set up a goal, and you think, how did that happen? How did that happen? I'm supposed to be marking him, I'm supposed to be in his area, and he's actually not come anywhere near me in the game, but he's drifting away from you all the time, and I think he's done a really good job for Arsenal today, and I think he's won them the game.
What about defensively? There weren't too many questions about Arsenal in that regard last season. Perhaps the one was left back. So we saw more of Timber than we did of Calafiori. Zinchenko obviously didn't get a game today. Do you think they have strengthened in that area now that Timber is hopefully going to stay injury-free, and now that they've recruited the new man?
Yeah, well, Mikel Arteta's just come into the actual studio there, and I think what he's doing every year, he's just responding. He's now not going into the transfer market and doesn't need to. We'll talk about transfer windows, but some of the most successful transfer windows are where you keep stability in your squad, and you just add that one or two players to it that just make it that sort of final piece of the jigsaw. In these two games against Villa last season, left-back was a problem. And we saw what City did. You could argue in the last 8, 9, 10 games of the season, Gvardiol's impact from left-back was immense. Not just actually from a defensive point of view, but from an attacking point of view, his power and his strength and his height. And I think that Arteta's reacted to that. He knows he's got Timber coming back, but he's got Calafiori as well, who comes on. He's a big boy, powerful, strong, can play obviously in a number of different positions. So I think that's definitely a response to what he needs from last season. And I said, you're talking about these fine margins of 1 goal and 2 goals that can tip the title race your way, and that could be today. I like what Timber did. I thought Timber kept a pretty close eye on Leon Bailey. I thought that he was he's a difficult customer to play against. I thought he did a good job. He was confident on the ball. He looked good when he went into midfield, still doing that job that Zinchenko does. And Calafiori, when he came on, looked competitive. He looked really strong and looked like he was up for the fight. I mean, he obviously led a little bit with Emi Martinez as well down here, didn't he? So he's got that little bit of spirit about him. And I never thought we'd see the game go back. 2 things. 1, 4-4-2 in defence. Strict 4-4-2. City, Arsenal, Villa. Really compact, rigid 4-4-2 as it actually should have been defensively all those years ago. It's different when we're on the ball, but also tall, quite strong back fours. And not seeing fullbacks go forward as much as we have done in the past. We built this sort of idea in our heads 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago that you've got to have attacking fullbacks that go forward. And they have to go forward all the time, and they have to overlap and underlap. We've now got to a situation whereby you've got a back 3, one of the right back or left back will stay, and then the other one will go in midfield alongside the other central midfield player, and that's happening quite a lot. Pep Guardiola's completely transformed his back four his team from being diminutive to being a team of giants. And Mikel Arteta is they've got a really strong team, Arsenal. They were put under real pressure from those set pieces at the end and the last 25 minutes, and they handled it really well. So they're a powerhouse team now. And that left back, I think, position, Zinchenko will still play his role. When you're playing against, I'm not being disrespectful, but the bottom 6 teams, bottom 10 teams, and you're going to have an absolute mountain of possession at home, and you're going to have to work hard to probe and poke the ball through in tight spaces. Zinchenko's going to be fantastic in those matches. But when you're playing against a really top team and you need to keep a clean sheet and you need to make sure you've got someone at the back post who can defend, and you need to make sure on set pieces you've got 6 big uns, that's when you'll need Timber. That's when you'll need Calafiori. So he's got that now, Mikel Arteta. I think it's a really good way in which he's adapted it. And he looked a little bit disappointed, Zinchenko, at the start of the game because he wants to play. But again, he will contribute enormously with his spirit, with his personality, but also on the pitch as well in certain games.
Just before we look at the other results, a word about Aston Villa, because obviously they've got the Champions League draw coming up next Thursday. How do you think they'll cope with the extra demands of what could be 8 or at least 10 games in that competition?
I've never seen a team who've done it for the first time in many, many years handle it really, really well. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me like it's a stretch. What a brilliant thing that actually Aston Villa are in the Champions League, but just the emotional, physical, mental, emotional sort of events. They're like big events, Champions League games, and it's going to be so sort of the spirit in this stadium is going to be massive. But then you've got to get them ready for a kick-off on Saturday straight after it, and sometimes you just get that real high, and then you get a little bit of a, right, we're going to a game again, it's the Premier League game, and it's hard for the players. The one thing I would say is that they've got a manager who has been around the block doing this, Europe, domestic competitions for many, many years, and knows how to handle it, and he made a lot of signings to be able to cope with it. So I'm more confident than I would ordinarily be. I've not got them in my top 4 this season because of the fact of that question, the Champions League situation, the idea of these games taking a lot out of it. I think they can do well in the competition because I think the manager is set up to win big matches. They could have won today. There's no doubt Aston Villa could have won that game. The 2 big chances in the match. They've got higher expected goals, if you believe in expected goals, which I think, to be fair, the 2 chances that Watkins had were massive chances. In another day, Villa would be winning today. So he's a great manager, but it's a big ask. It's a big ask for the club. It's a big ask for the players and the squad, but they've got a chance because of the experience that they've got above them.
So elsewhere today, Ipswich actually took the lead at Manchester City, but it was just poking the bear, wasn't it? And Haaland is something else.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that me and Carragher agreed on our Monday night predictions was that...
Was this the one thing?
I think it was the one thing that we agreed on. Yeah, it was actually, because I don't think we actually named the same answer for anything else. But when they said top scorer for the season, we just straight away said Haaland and moved on to the next category. He's just very special. His size, his finishing, his power. I think the way in which he plays now means he's not getting injured. How do you mark him? He's just it'd be a nightmare, and he'll score dozens of goals every single season that he plays and stays fit, and that's the main thing for City. Yeah, we watched some of the goals going, didn't we? And it was tough. We thought Ipswich in the end were going to get an absolute battering, but in the end it wasn't that bad. It's been a tough start to obviously the Premier League for them, playing Liverpool and City. So we'll see how they go in the next few weeks. But for City, it's been a good start for them.
Hasn't been a great day for goalkeepers. Martinez might look at his contributions to second goal here. There was the Muric mistake in the Manchester City game, and Jordan Pickford had a bit of a howler as well. It's starting to look a little bit concerning for Everton after their defeat at Spurs. Yeah,
last week they get pumped by Brighton. Today they get pumped at Tottenham, and I'm not surprised about today. A little bit more surprised about last week, but they're a weird bunch, aren't they, Everton? They could do this for like 2-3 months, and then they could end up. Sean Dyche sort of last day. They've done it for the last few years. They've been sort of riding their luck, haven't they, of relegation. And they're going to be down there again, I would think. Just what's happening there and worrying first week. Everton fans, I think of this. I thought of this for Villa and Newcastle for a number of seasons, but then they found something. They've got great managers in. They've got a change of ownership. With Everton, I every year I think there were Monday night predictions was that Everton are going to outperform. Was that category? What was the category called? Where surprise of the season? I was at Everton. But they never surprised me. And the Everton fans will be going to the game. They go every single game they go, and they're like tens and tens of thousands of them. And the hope that every fan gets at the start of the season is obviously great, but then they just get let down by poor performance levels, really, really poor performance levels over many years now, and it's really disappointing. And obviously a great club. And I said at the start of this game, it's brilliant to see Aston Villa. I want the top clubs to be disrupted. I want the league to be competitive all the way through it. And it's great to see the idea that we don't just have this top four that always get in there, and that clubs are spending £1 billion and not getting in the top four. That's what we want to see. And Everton just don't seem to be able to muster anything for their fans, for us, for anybody. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle year on year. They're going to get caught out at some point.
Well, no Gary Neville podcast would be complete without a mention of Manchester United. So what was the impression? You thought what?
I thought you were going to miss them out then for a second.
No, it wouldn't be complete. So what was your impression of that? I mean, is it another false dawn, or were they unlucky against Brighton?
No, I wouldn't use the word unlucky. I mean, it's very difficult to play football without a centre forward. Just full stop. I know it's been done, false nines, but then you've got two really special wide players that make those inside-outside runs. I just think playing with Mount and Fernandes as the highest players, and then obviously you've got Ahmad and Rashford wide, it's almost as if they gave away a first half again. They weren't playing badly, just it was a nothing really, and you don't really score goals. It's hard to score a goal. I mean, Ahmad had the chance, didn't he, where he probably should have done better at the back post. But it's hard to score goals. It's hard to play football, I think, well, if you've not got a good centre-forward, let alone got a centre-forward at all. You need a focal point. You need someone to be able to make runs in behind to stretch defences. If you're Brighton or if you're Fulham last week, it's quite simple, really, to actually play football when you've got Mount and Fernandes there. They're very good players. It's not a reflection upon them. And I know Højlund's injured. So when Xerxes comes on at the start of the second half, the game almost starts at half-time for Manchester United. So they've almost given away 45 minutes. I thought the first goal that they conceded was poor from the centre-backs. I thought Harry Maguire should have dealt with the first one in. I then thought he should have cut the space off of the ball being played back inside. I thought Mazraoui should have got closer to block the cross. And then I thought it was poor from Martinez as well. So there were almost like three of them contributed to that. It was a really poor first goal to give away. Then obviously they get back into the game, Manchester United, and then you think that goal goes in, the Xerxes one where Garnacho obviously plays the ball across and it's in. Well, it's not in. That's the problem. You think it's going in, and obviously Xerxes, he just tries to get out of the way of it. I think he's trying to get up, actually, and there's nothing he can do about it. And at that point, obviously, the game's 1-1, and I'm walking up to the gantry here thinking the game's going to finish at 1-1, and then you see, oh my God, it's 2-1. And it's really, again, organisationally quite poor in the sense that they've cleared a corner. And when you clear a corner, until you know that ball's been fully cleared, you don't go back into your normal shape. You have to stay in your corner shape, which is stay in the areas that you are actually on the pitch. So you come out together. I think there's Casemiro and a couple that are at the back post. They run basically towards the ball, across the other defenders, which just leaves an absolute mountain of space at the back post. And that's basics. That's basics. You need to hold your discipline. If you're a right back and you find yourself at left back because you're coming out from a corner, that's where you stay. You play left back for maybe sometimes a minute until the game's got back into its natural pattern and you can find a lull in the game to go back. And they just came out of their shape. They moved from a corner back into normal shape rather than treating it as a second phase of a corner still. And that was the big mistake they made. And it was poor defending. And, I was thinking about how to describe the draw. I don't think the draw would have been a disaster at Brighton away. Brighton are a decent team. United have had some difficulties there and challenges. So you think 4 points going into the Liverpool game. But when you lose and you've only just beaten Fulham in the sort of last few minutes of the game, it does put a little bit of pressure on the game next week against Liverpool. It does put that little bit of a squeeze. The balance isn't right. It isn't. That 4-2-2-2, which I think Erik ten Hag has gone with and is going with. I don't mind it. But I would have thought Ahmad and Rashford would have been sort of like split strikers. and that we would have had a box in midfield. But we're finding it at times where them two are so wide that you've almost got nothing up front at all. And obviously he had to correct it at half-time today. He had to correct it, into the second half against Fulham. So I'd expect next week probably they're going to change system against Liverpool because it's happened twice now. But it's what that balance is, how he gets these players in. Obviously, he's changing the back four again during the game today. Taking centre-backs off. Again, taking centre-backs off, that was a no-no back in the day. You might take a full-back off if you're losing a game, but if you're drawing or winning a game, you don't tend to take off a defender. You tend to sort of trust your back four and build that familiarity. So there are still, I think, tweaks, uncertainties in his mind of who to play, when to play. I think he's almost got to select a system, select the back four, select the midfield. Difficult at the moment with the striker because Højlund's not in. But for the moment, select something up front and select a way of playing and go with it. Because I think that we're still changing back fours, we're still changing midfield, we're still changing systems during games. And it's only been 2 games, but we've done it in both games. So it's a pattern. Once, yeah, okay. Twice is a pattern starting to emerge. Let's nip those patterns in the bud, I think. Because once they start to become a negative pattern, you can start to get a bit of trouble. And we know that Erik ten Hag is going to be under pressure if he starts the season in the same vein as he did last season. So I think next week's really important before the international break. But I think getting a pattern of play, getting a style of play, getting a team picked that he believes is his best, and then going with it. I get the fact that some have come late from transfers, some have come late back from the Euros, but I think now, with another week inside them, they've got, 8 days, haven't they, before Liverpool? I think now's the time. Obviously, there'll be a break after that, but I don't think we can go into games thinking that you can change your back four part way through it and you can change systems part way through it. That's happened already twice. I don't think a third time it works.
So as we enter the final week of the transfer window being open, and you look at what's happened so far, who would you say has had a good window and who's had a bad window?
Who's had a bad window? Look, I suppose in some ways, Liverpool, you could argue, have not had a good window because they've not brought the players in that they want. They haven't signed anybody yet, have they? So I think that would say is not a successful window yet. Manchester City, I think Gundogan coming in and getting him back, which I think was a surprise to Pep Guardiola, probably just turns that window into something a little bit more exciting for City fans. I thought United was okay, and think it's okay. Don't change it after today. A lot of the teams at the top. Villa's, I think, has been a good one. They've got players in. They've strengthened the squad to be able to cope with what's going to come this season. So I thought Villa have had a successful transfer window. I'm trying to think of what the other clubs have done. I think
Chelsea. What about Chelsea?
It's difficult to predict. I think that's the thing with United, with Chelsea, with Tottenham maybe, and obviously the big signing of Solanke. It's how they actually do. So you're not quite in a sure mind that what they've done is going to improve them or going to make it more confusing. That's the problem you've got. I think with Arsenal, Timber coming back, which is like a new signing, and obviously Calafiori coming in, even though it's only minimal business, I get the feeling that could make that difference in games like today. Leon Bailey's been kept quiet today. Leon Bailey scored last season, didn't he, in the game at the Emirates? So you can say that those differences, that Timber coming back and Calafiori coming in, even though it's not a massive transfer window for Arsenal, could be deemed a very successful one. I'm trying to think sort of other clubs going down the league. Inspire me, Rob.
I thought I'd inspire you with Chelsea because of the bloated nature of the squad, the fact that they are now in a position where it seems they're having to try and get rid of players. They've got this so-called bomb squad of players who aren't involved just because they brought in
you cannot sit here and say Chelsea have been a successful. Look, the net spend's not been that big, so generally they've brought cash in as well. But the way in which they've handled the transfer window of Chalobah, of Conor Gallagher, of Sterling, that in itself makes it an unsuccessful transfer window in terms of the damage it does to the club. From a values perspective, whether the players actually can go and become successful that they've signed some talented players, but they've signed talented players over this last couple of years. They've got I named them in my top 4 on Monday, purely off the fact that they've got, if you said to me, you've got Neto, you've got João Felix, you've got Cole Palmer, you've got Caicedo, Fernandes and Lavia as a front 6. Most top teams in the country would love that as a front six. It's a really talented group of players, and there's loads to come in around that as well. They've got a really young, aggressive back four that can push up the pitch, but there's still a question mark over centre forward. There's still a question mark over goalkeeper. They've got 6 goalkeepers. So you can't sit here and say it's been a successful one until we actually see it perform and see how it pans out. They've got players in, but then they will do the money that they're actually throwing at it. Manchester United got players in for many, many years, but there weren't many successful transfer windows. So we'll actually have to wait and see with that. I like the clubs who basically have the conveyor belt. A couple fall off that end, a couple come on this end. I like the conveyor belt when that's where you got to an Arsenal level and a Manchester City level where you've got this sort of stability through the club, and you know you don't need this big, large turnover. And I'm a club owner that have massive problems with this. It's hard work getting recruitment right and not getting it wrong year on year out. Thankfully, I don't have to do it nowadays. It's someone else doing it at the club. But generally, it's hard. It's the most difficult thing to get right in football. And I think that Chelsea, we have to see how they do. But they've got promise. They've got promise, but they've got big challenges. The coach has got to manage a difficult situation there.
Okay, well, we'll find out what happens over the next week. For now, Gary, thanks for joining us as ever on the Gary Neville Podcast, because I know you've got a big week ahead of sparring with your colleague ahead of next weekend's big match. So are you all ready for that?
Yeah, I actually am, I think. Look, it's not the Liverpool of 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's not. That was a great Liverpool side, but still a competitive side. But they come to Anfield as well with question marks over them in respect of the new manager's first foray into Old Trafford. Old Trafford is not an easy place to come. Liverpool have done well there at times, but Manchester United have also had good success in this game. So, look, I think Manchester United should look forward to it. What I hope is that out of today, that Manchester United look upon it as being a kick-starting to the season, because they've gone into the first 2 games. They've got 3 points from them. It'd be difficult, I think. It'd be a bit of pressure building if they lost to Liverpool at home next week. So I think I'm looking forward to the game. I think United should do well.
Should, he says.
Should do well.
We'll find out. Thanks again.
Thank you.